Over the years, we've seen a huge freshening of the affordable C-segment compact car, and today I have two of the newest entries for 2019. On my left, the all-new 2019 Volkswagen Jetta, and on my right, the all-new 2019 Toyota Corolla hatchback. But I know a lot of you are probably wondering which one of these small compact cars deserves your hard-earned money. That's what we're here to find out. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. Before we get started on the Corolla versus Jetta comparison test, I wanted to do a quick shout out to the sponsor of this video, Vincero Collective Watches. Now, I've actually been working with Vincero for nearly 2 years now, and the reason is simple, because they offer distinctive, timeless, high-quality watches that always get me noticed every time I'm wearing one of them. Now, they did send me a new watch for 2019. This is known as the Rogue Black and Blue, and just like the other watches I've talked about on the channel, the actual watch casing is made of a surgical-grade stainless steel. The blue silicone strap on this one is interchangeable, so you can swap it out for something else if you get tired of this one. And the watch face is made of that same crystal sapphire glass, so it's scratch resistant and water resistant by up to 10 ATMs. Now, if you guys are interested in purchasing this watch that I'm showing here or any other watches, be sure to visit the link in the description below for a special Redline discount. So both of these compact cars got pretty extensive overhauls for 2019. If you look at the design of both of them, they look really nothing like their previous generation counterparts. But let's first start with the all-new Corolla hatchback, and then I'll move on to the Jetta in terms of the front fascia. Now, Toyota is basically introducing a newer design language on the Corolla. It's got these really aggressive-looking headlights with the L-shaped LED daytime running lights. You have this massive grille that, again, reminds you a lot of the Lexus products with how big the grille is. This particular one that I'm showing you is the XSE trim, so it includes things like the LED fog lights. The full LED headlights are going to be standard equipment. You even have LED turn signals and then a slightly more aggressive ground effects kit. Overall, the Corolla's design looks lower, it looks wider. It definitely doesn't look like any Corolla of the previous years, which kind of had just like a frumpy looking design. This, by the way, is the hatch model, which is new, a new body style in the US for 2019. But in contrast to the Jetta, as typical with any German car, it has a much more conservative look. The big difference here is a much larger grille, or if you guys remember the old Mark 6 Jetta, it was a little bit on the boring side. Volkswagen essentially tried to keep a lot of the design influences the same here, but with the wider grille. These LED headlights, which are standard equipment across the board, just like the Corolla, although if you guys go for the upper SEL trims, you'll have an upgraded projector LED. You do also have just incandescent turn signals and then halogen fog lights at the lower fascia. None of that, aggressive skirt or front chin spoiler like you get on the Corolla. So this is a much more mature looking vehicle. None of them are particularly unattractive. It's just kind of going to appeal to a different taste, a different personality, depending on whether you want your compact car to be a little bit more mature and bland looking or a little bit more aggressive but slightly boy racer. Now, in contrast, in the side profile, let me first talk about the wheels on the Corolla hatch. This XSE comes with upgraded 18-inch wheels. They're wrapped in two 25 series tires. If you guys go for the standard SE trim, which is the base model, you'll have a 16-inch wheel. These wheels definitely look almost like a sport compact. This car tries to, remind you a little bit of like a Volkswagen GTI or a Mazda 3 or like a Mazda Speed 3. Now, the Corolla hatch is actually a lot smaller than the Jetta and the Corolla sedan. Its wheelbase at around 104 inches long is about 2 inches shorter than the Corolla sedan, and only at 169 inches long, this is about 15 inches shorter than that Jetta over there and about 13 inches shorter than the Corolla sedan. So keep in mind, the hatch is new this year, but it will be followed by a sedan for the 2020 model year, which I'll be driving in February of 2020. 2019. Now, in contrast to the Jetta, the side profile of the Jetta definitely has a much more conventional shape to it. VW didn't try to do any with that swoopy coupe-like styling here. You have these interesting character lines that go across the vehicle that add a little bit more drama. And then the wheels. This SEL Premium comes with 17-inch wheels, so they're an inch smaller than what you get on the Corolla, but an inch bigger than what you get on the base model. They're wrapped in slightly narrower tires. They're a little bit more eco-minded tires to give the Jetta a little bit more improved fuel economy. This particular one has a sunroof option, which is actually standard on this trim level. The Corolla hatch does not offer a sunroof, but the word is that Toyota may offer that on the sedan version. And then follow me over to the rear profile of both vehicles. Let's first start with the Jetta. This has a very Audi-like look to the design. I love the standard LED taillights that Volkswagen throws in even on the base models. You do have an incandescent for the turn signals, but the brake lights, the reverse lights, as you can see, are LED. You have an LED tag light. The one thing I really hate that Volkswagen did are these fake exhaust tips underneath here that kind of try to look like an exhaust, but if you look closely, the exhaust is underneath the bumper. So again, it tries to give it a sportier look, but instead they could have just gone without that fake looking exhaust tip. Now, in terms of the trunk capacity, the VW's is also very good. It is a little bit smaller than last year's Jetta at 14 cubic feet of space. The seats fold down 60/40, which is always great. And then underneath here, VW gives you a spare tire, a temporary spare, so you don't have to deal with a fix-a-flat kit. Now, coming in contrast to the Corolla's rear end, obviously this is the hatch model. It's not a completely direct comparison, but these two cars are in the same category and they're roughly the same price. Now, the Corolla hatch definitely has a much more boy racer look to it. My tester is missing that big spoiler that kind of comes out that gives this thing a little bit more of an aggressive look. The LED taillights are also full LEDs. You have an LED for the turn signal, the reverse light, and the rear license plate area as well. And then, of course, Toyota had to copy Volkswagen with the signature fake outlet exhaust down here. It tries to, again, to look like an actual exhaust, but it's not like that at all. The hatch area does give the Corolla a slight advantage when you look at the VW. When you open up the cargo area here, it's rated at around 17.8 cubic feet of space. It actually looks smaller than the Volkswagen's when you're actually comparing it in real life terms. The difference is you can fold down those seats and then you can kind of pack stuff up to the roof, which does give the Corolla that advantage, it being a hatchback. And then underneath the floor over here, you can see the Corolla also gives you a temporary spare, so you don't have to deal with a fix-a-flat kit. So these are compact cars, and the interior is going to be an area where a lot of people place high emphasis on things. Now, first of all, getting into the Jetta, the door has that typical German solid feel. It definitely feels heavy. It sounds kind of like a bank vault. Not quite as solid maybe as like a Mercedes, but you can tell that this is a German car, even though it is built here in America. Now, first getting into the Jetta's interior, let me first show you the key fob. Here's the current VW key fob. I've shown you this key fob before on other newer products. This particular one does not have a remote start, but you can get a cold weather package that will include it. Basically, just keep the key fob in here, just put your foot on the brake, and then the start-stop button here is by the shifter. And then the vehicle will start right up for you. Now, the first thing you're going to notice about the Volkswagen is definitely its high-tech interior. You have two LCD displays here. They're roughly the same size. That's an 8-inch display. This is Volkswagen's digital cockpit display, which is very similar to Audi's virtual cockpit. This display here comes standard if you guys go for the SEL or the SEL Premium trim that my tester is. This definitely makes the car's interior feel super high-tech. And if you guys remember the old Mark 6 Jetta, this feels much nicer in terms of the build quality. The dashboard here is a soft touch graining material. It's got that faux stitching here. It's got some aluminum look plastic. Down here it is hard touch plastic, but that's kind of okay. I wasn't expecting that. I do also appreciate the way the vents look. They're kind of buried down here with your audio or your climate controls over there. The door panels also have the same soft touch materials from the dashboard. You have express up down for the front windows, and then also for the rear windows, so I wasn't expecting that. That's also a great feature to have. The steering wheel, this is definitely turning into an old steering wheel. We've seen Volkswagen use this steering wheel on other products for like the last 5 years, so I do think it's time for them to update it. It does have a nice flat bottom. It's basically tilt telescoping, and then the driver's seat on my side has 3-person memory, which is unusual in this class, and then it's also an 8-way power, which is again very nice to have. The seats themselves are also 3-level heated, or they're also cooled. And you can turn them on at the same time in case you guys are all too hot or too cold. Definitely a cool feature. Only a handful of cars in this segment offer cooled seats. I believe the Kia and the Hyundais are the only two that offer the cooled seat function. Now, the seats themselves also, I find them to be very comfortable. supportive. They're a little bit harder, but this is the real leather. If you guys go for the standard or the lower trims, you'll get the leatherette trim. The head unit here is probably the centerpiece of this car. It's got, you can see here, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto is standard. The touch response is also fantastic. You can see here you can pull up Waze in here if you'd like to use that, which also, again, fills out the screen very nicely. Going over back to the Volkswagen interface, you can access it by pushing on VW there. This is basically their latest in-car net infotainment system. It works very well. It's also very quick to respond. I think VW does a really good infotainment system, and after years of them kind of lagging in the business, this is a huge upgrade. When you put the vehicle into reverse, it does have parking sensors in the back, and then you have a nice rear view camera here, but no trajectory. It's got the distance markers, but no trajectory. Very good resolution for what it is. This controls the 8-speed automatic transmission. It has a sport mode over there, a manual mode, no paddles on the wheel, and then you also have individual drive modes right here where you can change it between eco, normal, sport, and then in custom, which allows you to tailor the steering and suspension and the throttle response to your liking. The center console over here has a lot of empty buttons, which kind of pisses me off considering this is the fully loaded model. My tester, for example, is missing a heated steering wheel, which I believe is what you get in the cold weather package models. You have an electronic parking brake, nice storage over here, and then you have a nice little storage over here with basically 2 USB ports that you get from there and to there. And then the glove compartment, you can see, is huge. This is definitely larger than what I was expecting. The lid itself is not lined with felt, but it is damped. But overall, the Jetta's interior feels particularly nice. Love the digital cockpit display, the bright, really impressive looking screens. The sunroof above you is a little bit larger than the standard sunroof. So overall, this is going to feel like a miniature luxury car. But in contrast, let's hop into the Corolla and see all the changes that Toyota has made. So after just being in the Volkswagen, stepping into the Toyota, the environment definitely is different from the VW. I mean, there was a time like 15 years ago where the Jetta always had a higher quality interior versus the Corolla, and that's kind of really not necessarily the case. Toyota has seriously upgraded the interior. Now let me first talk about the door, how it sounds when it shuts. It definitely doesn't sound quite as solid as the Jetta's. It has a little bit of a tinier sound, so again, not necessarily the best thing, but those of you may not, some of you may not even care. Now, here's the key fob for the Corolla. You can see it's Toyota's push button start, their current key fob. It feels really light. And then my tester has a 6-speed manual, so you have to actually push a clutch pedal in to start the vehicle up. But when you do that, just push this button here and it'll start the engine right up. And then, of course, it has that typical Toyota starter sound. It sounds a little bit quieter than the Jetta's 1.4-liter engine, which has a little bit more of a raspier note. Everything else about this interior, however, has been completely upgraded versus the previous generation. You can see it's got that floating tablet-style screen. Toyota has upgraded the materials in here with some of that soft-touch material with the faux stitching along this part of the dash. On this part of the dash, you have the silver-painted accented trim. You have the piano black accents. You have, soft-touch door panel materials, which are nice. And then the windows are expressed up-down for all 4. So there was a time where this was reserved for expensive luxury cars, and now we get them in a compact car, an inexpensive Corolla and Volkswagen Jetta. Now the instrument panel you can see here has a 7-inch helper screen, which is optional. The base models do not get that screen. You can kind of customize it, but not quite as much as you can in the Volkswagen. The steering wheel here you can see is tilt telescoping. It's not a heated wheel. It doesn't have a flat bottom, but it has some new switchgear versus the previous generation. The driver's seat here is a 10-way power adjustment. It's got a 2-way power for the lumbar, but it doesn't have memory seats like you get in the Jetta. And then you also only get heated seats as opposed to heated and cooled seats like you get in the Volkswagen. So again, Toyota's not kind of giving us all the features, but there's a couple of nice things here. Now let's first talk about the infotainment system here. This is basically Toyota's 8-inch Entune 3.0 system. You can see there's the home screen. You can kind of customize this to your liking if you guys would like to do that. You can basically see here the response is relatively good for the infotainment system. It's a little bit slow to move between different menus and sub-menus at times. If you go back to the menu screen here, you can see Apple CarPlay is standard across the board. The screen itself doesn't look as crystal clear as what I saw in the Jetta, so that's kind of a little bit of a ding. It's like Toyota doesn't use as bright of a screen as Volkswagen does. Like, for example, if I go here to Waze, it just doesn't look as nice. It's a little bit on the grainier end. This is something I noticed when you sit in the cars back to back. Not really a huge deal, but Toyota needs to work on upgrading the crystal quality of that screen, just the clarity of it. When you put the vehicle into reverse, you can see it has a backup camera, no trajectory, but it does have the distance markers, which are good. Again, it doesn't look quite as crystal clear as the VWs. The shifter on this 6-speed manual is a little bit long in the throws, but it's nice and fluid and smooth. The clutch take-up also is on the medium side. We'll go into the driving dynamics of this later on. You can see there's a button here to turn off the stability control. You can also turn on and off the active rev matching function, which is a new feature for the manual here. You have an electronic parking brake. You have cup holders over here, and then you have a nice padded armrest over here with a little bit more storage, and then it gives you a USB port over there. The interior definitely doesn't feel as roomy in this car as the Jetta. It just feels a little bit more constrained. The windshield's not as, open. There's a bigger pillar here. The glove compartment over here also is a little bit smaller. It's not lined with felt, but it is damped. And the Corolla just in general offers a little bit less space and less storage. The seats though are comfortable. I actually find them to be more comfortable than the Jettas because they hold you a little bit better. They're a little bit softer, and I also like the cloth inserts that you get on this particular trim. But overall, in terms of which one feels more tech-oriented, that's definitely the VWs, but the Corolla's interior feels a little bit more familiar, and I actually really like the design of this one as well, so it's just going to come down to your personal taste. So getting into the back seat of the Corolla hatch, this is a new model for this year, and the one thing I'm noticing immediately is the fact that the back seat is pretty cramped. The door doesn't even open all that. This is the widest that it opens, so it's a little bit difficult to get yourself in here, or if you're trying to get like a child seat in here, it's a little bit difficult. But when you shut the door, you can see the legroom. Toyota only quotes this at 30 inches of legroom, which is like 10 inches less than what you get in the Corolla sedan. You do get a slightly flat floor over here, but this is where I had the front seats to drive, and I'm 5'7". It is very cramped in here. It feels dark. You have one map pocket over here, and then Toyota does give you a nice armrest that folds down with a cup holder. But in terms of features, no heated rear seats, no rear seat vents either. And then the materials are also hard touch plastic, which is a downgrade from the front seats. So in terms of the back seat space, the Corolla is not the one you'd want if you actually plan to put your tall friends or a car seat back here. So in contrast to the Corolla, the Jetta's back seat basically feels like you're sitting in a class above. VW actually quotes the space here at around 37 inches of legroom, so 7 inches more legroom, and you can instantly feel how open an area is. But the legroom, as you can see, is very good. I have good foot space under here. The hump over on the floor is a lot higher though versus the Corolla, so fitting 3 people across may be difficult. No rear seat vents either back here, and then VW only gives you one map pocket here on this side. Heated rear seats are available if you guys go for a cold weather package, but as you can see here, I have more headroom here. There's just a lot more light coming in, which is definitely a nice feeling of openness that you get. Now, you also have a nice little armrest that folds down that gives you 2 cup holders, and overall this feels like it's more akin to a mid-size car, but it's surprising because the Corolla sedan has a lot more legroom than the Corolla hatch, but between these two, I'd have to definitely give the nod to the Jetta for rear seat space. So under the hood of these two compact cars, they couldn't be more different. One is turbocharged while the other one is naturally aspirated. Both of them are basically new or updated engines for the 2019 model year. Let's first talk about the Jetta. This is an engine that VW has been using for the last couple of years, and Volkswagen decided to go with just one engine for 2019. It's a 1.4 liter turbocharged gasoline direct injection 4-cylinder. Volkswagen first showed us this engine a couple of years ago, and it was the base motor. VW got rid of the old 1.8 turbo. So now it makes 147 horsepower and 184 foot-pounds of torque. Now that torque is actually at only like 1400 RPM, so it's got massive amounts of low-end torque. VW actually offers the Jetta with 2 transmissions, a 6-speed manual, which is only limited to the base S trim, or all the other trims will get an 8-speed automatic that this particular one has. It's basically up 2 gears versus the previous model. Jettas are still only front-wheel drive. This one is rated at 30 in the city, 40 on the highway. You're looking at around a 2,900-pound curb weight. Now, in relation to the Jetta, the Corolla has an all new engine for 2019. It was long overdue. The old one had a 1.8 that carried on for like 15 years. It's basically Toyota's 2-liter dynamic force gasoline direct injection 4-cylinder engine. It's got a high compression ratio. It's basically naturally aspirated. Toyota is still not doing a turbo in the Corolla. And this one's actually the more powerful option compared to the Jetta, 168 horsepower, but torque is significantly less at only 151 foot-pounds, and it's realized at like almost 5,000 RPM. Now, transmission choices, Toyota's actually going with a very sporty route. My particular tester has a 6-speed manual transmission with active rev matching. Active rev matching in a Corolla, what does the world come to? Or if you guys don't know how to drive stick, you can also get a CVT transmission with a physical first gear, so it gives you kind of like good off-the-line responsiveness that you typically don't associate with the CVTs. Now, surprisingly, the Corolla is the heavier vehicle, despite it being about 15 inches shorter. This weighs around 3,000 pounds, and fuel economy with the manual is rated at 28 in the city, 37 on the highway. All of them are still front-wheel drive. This runs on regular. If you guys get the CVT, you get 1 mpg better on the forefront. But you guys are probably curious to know how the turbocharged car and the manual naturally aspirated car drive, so let's get them out on the road and see how they all perform. So with one of these cars being turbocharged and the other one being naturally aspirated, this comparison test may actually be a good way to show the differences between a turbo engine and an A engine, in case you guys have never actually had a chance to drive a turbocharged engine. Now let's first obviously start off with the 2019 Volkswagen Jetta. Now the last time I drove this Jetta, it was practically almost a year ago. It's hard to imagine this thing's been on the market for a year, and I've started to see them trickle around my local DC area, so people are buying these things. And for this generation, Volkswagen has switched over to all using a 1.4 liter turbo. A GLI will be shown at the Chicago Auto Show most likely in February, but until then, all we have is this 147 horsepower, 1.4 liter turbo motor with a good amount of torque, 184 foot-pounds at only like 1,400 RPM. So when you want to pass somebody, the horsepower is a little bit down compared to most of the competition and the previous generation with its old 1.8. But this thing has so much low-end torque, you don't really have to rev the Jetta out, which is the best thing about the car. To be honest, it has a very kind of almost effortless, more mid-size sedan feel as it goes down the road. And the 8-speed automatic, I have it in its sport setting right now. It produces really good shifts. It's very smooth. I did find at times when it's in its top gear, it has trouble getting out of the highest gear. You kind of have to put your foot past the click point and then it'll downshift relatively quickly. But if you don't do it past the click point, it won't downshift all that fast, because VW has tuned this thing in search of the best fuel economy possible. Now, going onto the highway, this is where the Jetta surprisingly does very well. I mean, if you guys haven't driven a modern compact car in a long time, this will seriously surprise a lot of you who have never done it, because they have basically inched more toward mid-size levels of refinement in terms of quietness. This has a relatively hushed cabin, and the ride quality, despite it being a semi-independent twist beam rear suspension, it actually rides relatively well. And the Jetta is still very much tuned for comfort. This is no longer the sporty Jetta that kind of went away when VW introduced the Mark 6. This new one has been kind of refined to be a little bit more premium, but it still skews toward comfort. And that's where the Corolla hatch is going to come in, because Toyota has really turned that dial way towards sport in the new Corolla hatch versus this car, which is more toward comfort. It has really good visibility around the Jetta. It's got a low hood, very thin A-pillars. The steering is electric, and it's also relatively smooth. It's relatively quick, but the suspension is very soft. It has a lot of body lean. So that's going to kind of deter some of you away from the Jetta if you're especially looking for a sportier end. I'll be curious to see how VW tunes the GLI version, considering that one is more supposed to be the sportier end. But with relatively comfortable seats, good visibility, a good ride quality, a quiet interior, this will feel like you've basically purchased a mid-size car as opposed to the compact cars that most people associate, the roughness that you associate with a compact car. Now, unlike the Corolla, Volkswagen's driver assistance aids are not standard. You have to go for the S trim with that driver assistance package, or at least step up to an SE trim. My SEL Premium does come standard with VW's adaptive cruise control with full speed range. It has active lane keeping assist, but again, it is not standard, whereas Toyota makes their Toyota Safety Sense P as standard. Kind of a dip in VW's value case, but this car feels very refined, very much like a mid-size car, which is what some of you could very much be looking for. Now, with the semi-independent twist beam rear suspension, and it is cold outside, you guys can see the snow, the Jetta definitely is not sportier. The steering kind of goes a little dead in this off-ramp as I take it a little bit faster, and the body leans pretty heavily. So again, this is not the sportier Jetta, but I do appreciate the low-end torque. The engine is relatively refined. You don't have to rev it out so much. I mean, it does get a little buzzy when you start pushing it, so I don't really want to. But I appreciate the transmission. Kind of wish it had paddles. No paddles on this car. Instead, you can drop into an S mode on the shifter, or you can use the gear shifter itself. Very not too much in terms of tire school. I'm impressed. I'm taking this off-ramp a little bit quicker than I probably should be, but I'm trying to test out the handling of this car. But let's see what the acceleration is like really quick. Little lag. Now this thing will short shift at 6,000 RPM. The Redline looks like it's a little bit past 6,000, so the power actually kind of tapers off past 5,500, so you don't really need to be pushing the engine that hard. I haven't driven this car with the 6-speed manual. It's limited to the base trim, so I imagine a lot of you probably won't be driving it. Most people are probably going to end up getting the the R-Line version for not much more money. Now, in terms of fuel economy, VW rates this at like 30 city, 38 on the highway. Actually, the computer's been telling me I've been averaging around 35.7 in my week's worth of testing, so excellent fuel economy. This thing uses regular gas, which is great. It's just a really pleasant car to drive. They basically took everything about the comfort-oriented previous generation Jetta, but made it feel a little bit more premium. Love the digital cockpit display. Love the new 8-inch touchscreen. It just looks more modern and sophisticated than what you get in the Corolla for me. In terms of interior quality, I didn't really hear any squeaks and rattles. There's a slight bit of wind noise, but not much in terms of road noise. So, I mean, as a pleasant commuter car that has the space of a mid-sized car from just a few years ago, the Jetta will very much excel, and I have no reason to doubt this will remain a strong seller. Will VW's SUVs take over as the best sellers in their US lineup? That, we'll have to wait and see. But until then, the current generation, the new Jetta, is one hell of a compact car that will seriously give a lot of other compact cars a run for their money. But let's hop into the Corolla and see how that one compares. Again, very different driving experience with the manual, with a naturally aspirated engine, but let's see how the Corolla compares anyways. So when I was just learning how to drive, if you basically hopped into a Jetta and then drove a Corolla afterwards, you'd be thinking to yourself, oh my God, German driving dynamics are just far superior to the Japanese. But nowadays, God, that makes me sound old. You hop into a Corolla hatch, and this particular one that I'm driving has a 6-speed manual transmission, a 2-liter naturally aspirated engine that revs to nearly 7,000 RPM, and 168 horsepower, almost 170 horsepower. That's nearly 30 horses more than the Jetta, which has like 147. However, because this engine is naturally aspirated, you have to rev it out because torque at 151 is not met until almost 5,000 RPM, which means to pass people, the revs have to go past 5,000 all the time, whereas the Jetta that I just got out of has all that low-end torque that doesn't really require you to rev this engine out. Now, thankfully, with the manual and this Rev-O-Matic function, you kind of enjoy doing that. I'm actually really genuinely surprised. If you guys haven't driven the new Corolla hatch or the upcoming Corolla sedan, which I'll be driving next month in February, this car, look at this thing, 5,000 RPM, it's screaming, and it loves to rev out. Now, of course, the sound isn't really much. This isn't like that VTEC crossover noise, but this car kind of is a little bit of a throwback. The engine itself also is really refined. This is part of the new Dynamic Force naturally aspirated engine with a high compression ratio. It's got a very great lean burn efficiency rating. And you know what? This is a surprising car. The ride quality on the Corolla hatch is also very settled, but I will say it is firmer than the Jettas. Those 18-inch wheels, they definitely transmit more impact harshness, but it's not like unbearable. It's just a lot firmer than what you remember your grandmother's Corolla to be. This has, the makings, it's got the good bones of a hot hatch. It's begging for a turbocharger to be strapped to that 2-liter with like another 100 horsepower at least. So it would be nice to see Toyota do an actual hot hatch version. This XSE version is kind of like a warm hatch, but it's just, we live in a world where a Corolla is more fun to drive than a Volkswagen Jetta. Where has the world come to nowadays? Now, I will say that the Corolla's interior feels noticeably less spacious. And you can see I have to downshift all the time to pass people. But it actually surprisingly enjoys being revved out. It likes to be beaten and thrashed upon, which makes this thing such a joy. As a driving enthusiast, I really appreciate this car. The shifter also is not bad. Like, it's got longer throws. It's kind of a long shifter, but I love the rev match function. You can turn it off from that button over there. Now the one thing is, this car is not as fast feeling off like when you first put your foot down. It's got good throttle response, but you have to wait for the revs to build, and that's again a downside to being a naturally aspirated engine. Turbo engines just make so much more power. They feel more effortless. Thankfully, this Toyota's done a really good job with the refinement of this engine, so you don't mind revving it out. I'm constantly going to third and basically putting my foot down all the time in this thing. Now back to the interior, it does feel a little bit more cramped than the Jetta. This is a considerably smaller car by like 15 inches, so a little over 2 feet shorter. But it makes the car a little bit more planted to drive. The steering in the Corolla is quicker ratio, I'm feeling. The suspension has less body lean than the Jetta. The visibility in here is not quite as good. This pillar is massive, and the windshield feels a little bit smaller. The view out of the back is okay. It's surprising that this car is not as good visibility-wise as the Jetta. But I will say that Toyota's Safety Sense P, their full safety driver suite, is standard on the Corolla. Even with this manual, you can get adaptive cruise control, which is great. Unlike the Volkswagen, which requires you to buy, an option or get the top trim. Well, yeah, just go into second there, it automatically blips the throttle for you. That's really nice. I mean, the steering is just so sharp in this car. It has way less body lean. It's just a really enjoyable car. This is, remember, on the new TNGA platform. It's very stiff, very solid feeling. Toyota's building sporty cars now. If you guys haven't driven them, they really are building sporty cars, and it's their own design. I mean, check this out. This car, I can take it a lot faster in the Jetta versus this, in the same off-ramp, and it feels a lot more responsive. I feel more confident pushing the Corolla around. It can handle a lot more. Especially, you can credit it to the suspension tuning and that fully independent suspension in the back. Manual. I love manuals for that reason. Look at this thing. It'll rev all the way out to nearly 7,000 RPM in a Corolla. For fun to drive, you can't beat a stick. I mean, the CVT in the Corolla is good, but I love the fact that Toyota offers a stick on this top-of-the-line XSE trim. So bravo, Toyota. You've really developed a commuter car that will put a smile on your face. I have a much bigger smile on my face because this is a manual, even though it doesn't feel quite as fast as the Jetta. I mean, the Jetta's 0 to 60 time is around a little over 8 seconds. This feels probably the same, although there are times where I feel like this is more, or it feels quicker from the seat of my pants because I'm more engaged. I mean, that's the whole point of a manual transmission. Now, just settling into a cruising along, which car is quieter? I hear a little more road noise in this car versus the Jetta. Wind noise is less, though. This car is a little bit more aerodynamic, it feels. But there's slightly more road noise. You can credit that to the 18-inch wheels. The ride is, again, a little bit firmer. Visibility is not as good. The seats, they feel like they hug you more. So, again, they give you more of that sportier vibe, especially with the cloth insert. It just feels really good. The Jetta is a more comfortable car because it feels more spacious. It's easier to see out of. It's a little easier to drive. But the Corolla is more engaging. I'll have to wait until I drive the Sedan Corolla next month in February to see if I really feel that the hatch model is how different it actually feels. But this is seriously one of the sportier offerings in the segment now. Could use more power, just could use another 100 more horsepower, but this is pretty impressive. So although both the Volkswagen Jetta and Toyota Corolla have consistently always competed with each other in this segment, as you can see, both manufacturers took a completely different route for their redesigns for 2019, which has kind of created an unconventional comparison test between the two. On one side, we have the Jetta, which is a conventional sedan with a turbocharged engine and an automatic transmission. On the other side, we have a very small hatchback with a manual transmission and a naturally aspirated engine. The two cars still are in the same price category, but they are two completely different vehicles. So choosing a winner in this comparison test is going to be based on my personal preference, and since I prefer driving, it's going to basically come down to that. Let me first talk about the Jetta with its strengths. It's got a very comfortable interior, a spacious interior, a very usable backseat, beautifully rendered digital displays in the instrument panel, and it's got the looks, while I consider them to be kind of boring, has a lot of that conservative, handsome design that's going to remind a lot of folks of an Audi. So if you're looking for a very comfortable commuter car that kind of flies under the radar, you're going to want the Jetta. This one, as tested, is $27,700. It's the most expensive Jetta basically you can buy. expensive, but not quite as expensive as some of the other vehicles in this segment. Now, in contrast with the Jetta, the Corolla has a couple of its other strengths. This is a vehicle that essentially is all new. We've never had the hatchback body style here in America yet. It's got a design that is very much screams lukewarm hatch. I really want Toyota to eventually offer an upgraded engine with this vehicle. A GLI is coming, but there's no indication of a performance Corolla. And the negatives of the Corolla have to basically just do with the fact that the infotainment system is not quite as beautifully rendered as the Jetta. The backseat is cramped, although it does have the versatility of a hatch. So really, if you guys are looking for a little bit more space in a Corolla, you may want to wait for the sedan. But the 6-speed manual in this combination is lovely. It also got a little bit better gas mileage than the Jetta. I was averaging around 35 miles per gallon on the Jetta. This could easily get 40 mpg if I was driving it really calmly. You can credit that to the 6-speed manual and the fact that it's a naturally aspirated engine. But in terms of which one was faster, the Jetta actually felt a little bit faster because of the torque. But which one I preferred driving? I definitely preferred driving the Corolla hatchback, which is surprising. We live in a world where a Corolla is more fun to drive than a Volkswagen Jetta. So for that reason alone, I'm going to pick the 2019 Corolla hatchback as my winner for this Redline comparison test. As tested, this one is around $24,300. If you guys wanted to add a CVT to this one, it's going to make it about $2,000 more expensive. But I hope you guys have enjoyed my Redline comparison test between the all-new Volkswagen Jetta and the all-new Toyota Corolla hatchback. If you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, make sure you follow me on Instagram at redline_reviews, like us on Facebook, and as always, guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.